Vasudeva Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaya Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtipraye Shivabhadreshu Nishtam Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki. So today we are starting new chapter on Prabhupada Lilamrita by Srila Das Goswami, chapter 55, the final lesson. Despite his promise to live, Srila Prabhupada said his life was still in Krishna's hands. Everything was. This free choice did not mean he was absolutely independent. Rather, the pure devotee's attitude is to freely surrender to Krishna, whatever happens. In the mood of the gopis, the foremost devotees of Lord Krishna, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu prayed, "You may handle me roughly in your embrace, or make me broken-hearted by not being present before me. But you are always my worshipable Lord, unconditionally." So this is the last verse of Shikshashtakam, and in fact the last teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he was in Jagannath Puri. So, and this is the mood of Srimati Radharani, and she is saying to Krishna that you may handle me roughly in your embrace or make me broken-hearted by not being present before me. But you are always my worshipable Lord, unconditionally. Unconditionally. There is no condition of that he has to be there because Krishna was away from Radharani for so many years and in the mood of separation. In that mood, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought in, and that should, of course, it takes lots of bhakti to come to this mood, this sentiment. Generally, something wrong happens in our life. Wrong means something that we didn't expect. We start doubting Krishna, we start doubting bhakti, everything, scriptures. But more surrendered a devotee is, more closer he is to Krishna. He just never doubts him. Unconditionally, he says, "I'm yours, and you are my worshipable Lord, no matter what happens." And Krishna shows through his devotees. Like Pandavas, what did they go through? It's amazing. Prahlad Maharaj, he's always there to protect them, but they did go through a lot. Of course, that wasn't their karma. It was all designed by Krishna. But Krishna shows through his devotees like these that I never leave my devotees. They're always with me and I'm always with them. Because the exchanges between the Lord and his pure devotees are always supremely personal, both the Lord and his devotees express desires and individual will. In his childhood Leela, Krishna sometimes breaks Mata Yashoda's butter pot and sometimes he allows her to catch him and bind him. In any case, the will of the Lord and the will of the devotee are always one in interest, but sometimes expressed in the form of a loving conflict. Sometimes expressed in the form of a loving conflict. Similarly, although Srila Prabhupada had promised his devotees that he would stay in the world and defy death, he still remained surrendered to the will of Krishna. Because the devotees pleaded to him, "Please stay with us." And he relented, but still, he said, "Whatever Krishna wants." Srila Prabhupada had already expressed his surrender in the prayer he had given his disciples to offer on his behalf. "My dear Lord Krishna, if you desire, please cure Srila Prabhupada." By the phrase, "if you desire," he was reminding his followers of the supreme prerogative of Krishna and was asking them to abide by it. Although he was also giving them an acceptable way to petition Krishna. So, acceptable way. If you desire, Please cure Srila Prabhupada. So that is real surrender mood actually. In a similar case of in 1967, he had given his disciples another prayer. My master has not finished his work. He had said then that Krishna had responded to this prayer, granting the wishes of the devotees. Srila Prabhupada himself was responding to the devotees' prayers, and Krishna had given him the choice. But as a surrendered soul, Srila Prabhupada waited for further developments, ever sensitive to Krishna's desire. As Prabhupada had said when invited by Kirtananda to come to his palace in New Vrindavan, let's see which palace I'm going to. So, so he's showing how we should live and how we should die. And and probably he knew what Krishna's plans are. That's why he is giving this kind of prayer now. As a loving tension can sometimes exist between the Supreme Lord and his pure devotee, so now a similar tension existed between Srila Prabhupada and his followers. Prior to his disciples' desperate petition at his bedside, Srila Prabhupada had seen his duty as instructing his disciples in how to die. Part of his mission was to set the perfect example in this most important lesson, how to pass life's ultimate test. But now his disciples were asking him to postpone the lesson and die and stay with them indefinitely in the preaching field. Stay with them indefinitely. Of course, that's not practical, not possible. But this was devotees' love. Because they could not imagine living without Srila Prabhupada. Everything was centered around Prabhupada. What Prabhupada said, where Prabhupada is going, which temple he is visiting, and the devotees would be um, motivated to come see him, serve him, and hear his words and please him by the book distribution school. This was the life. They couldn't imagine anything else. And now Srila Prabhupada was leaving, and and actually many problems happened after Prabhupada left because devotees just didn't know what to do. And Prabhupada had agreed, showing that he had the ability to live if he chose. But sooner or later, he would have to return to the lesson on how a person should face the end of life. So even at that time, he's not eating anything, not drinking anything, so just some charnamrit. He was still uh, recording his purports on Bhagavatam, 13th chapter, 10th canto, Brahmvimahun Leela, and still instructing his disciples. I mean, it was still so much of his pure or perfectly situated in his consciousness. That was amazing thing. One special feature of Srila Prabhupada's activities in his relating intimely or intimately to the human condition, while at the same time remaining aloof and transcendental. As a pure devotee, he was not subjected to the law of karma, which awards reactions for pious and sinful deeds. He was not born by the force of karma, nor would he die by force of karma. As stated by Srila Rupa Goswami, one whose body, mind, and words are fully engaged in devotional service to Lord Krishna is a liberated soul, even while living in this world. So yes, this is the definition of liberation that Rupa Goswami has given. Normally, people talk about liberation means after leaving the body, merging in Brahm Jyoti and this and that. Rupa Goswami says, no, while living in this body, one who is engaged all his body, mind, and words in the service of the Lord, he's a liberated soul. People often misunderstand the movements of a pure devotee within the material. Just as one, on seeing clouds blowing past the moon, may think the moon itself is moving. The Shastra therefore warns us never to see the Guru as an ordinary man subject to karma. So, yes, Prabhupada was definitely not an ordinary man and pure devotee, and it was proven by the work he did. But Srila Prabhupada, while always transcendental to this world, showed the conditioned souls how they could come to the stage of liberation by constantly thinking about Krishna and serving him, so that at the time of death they could return to Krishna in the eternal spiritual world. And Prabhupada's lessons are always practical and universal. Srila Prabhupada's books, for example, were not mere theory but were practical and full of realized knowledge. And Prabhupada practiced what he preached. His entire life was exemplary. He had been in family life, even then he had vigorously preached by starting his Back to Godhead magazine. In poverty and obscurity, he had struggled to start a spiritual movement. And by the grace of Krishna and his spiritual master, he had become successful. He had always shown by his human like attempts his willingness to bravely take on austerity and face danger. He had shown exemplary spiritual life for all to try and follow. He had gone alone in old age to a foreign country and had chanted Hare Krishna in a park in New York City, attracting the young men and women of America. Therefore, everyone should take his example and try to serve Krishna, despite the immediate impediments. Srila Prabhupada encountered obstacles, yet by his free will and the help of Krishna, he surmounted them. And so many obstacles, whether by government or thugs or cheaters, so many different kinds, but he surmounted them all. This was his wonderful example. It is said that Lord Chaitanya, 500 years ago, made surrender to Krishna more attainable than Lord Krishna had 5,000 years ago. And now, in the 20th century, Srila Prabhupada has made Krishna consciousness possible for people all over the world. And this is a great contribution of Srila Prabhupada. He made it possible for people all over the world. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, mostly in Jagannath Puri, he resided, and before in Navadvip. And he asked his disciples to preach, Lord Nityananda to preach, Hardas Thakur to preach. But they preached only in Bengal and Odisha, mostly in Bengal. And following disciples also, they preached. Uh, Naramdas Goswami, he went to Assam side to preach. Shyamanand Prabhu, they preached. Then came Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He wanted to fulfill the desire of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But there were so many impediments. He started Namhatta was his idea. He started that. But so many impediments. And then he begged to the Lord to send me a ray of Vishnu's, your ray, who can help preach. And Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj came. He preached vigorously, yes, but he only preached in India. He established 64 Gaudiya Math temples, but only in India, and hardly anything in South India. But Srila Prabhupada, and he came and he went to America and he established the movement in America and then sending disciples all over Europe, South America, Japan, Russia also he went, Germany, so many places. Even Pakistan we studied, or Brahmanand Maharaj had gone to Pakistan, Sri Lanka, all over disciples are going. And then he came to India and he established temples and opened temples in India. Nobody has ever done in the history what Prabhupada had done. And that too in such a short time, and starting at the age of 70. And teaching disciples everything from scratch, training them in everything. It's it's just mind-boggling what he has done. And that at the same time, writing books, training his disciples in everything, accounting, how to do deity worship, how to cook for the deities, how to do painting. For painters also he taught them. And so many other things. And this, I mean, by this we don't know what's the actual uh, position of Prabhupada in the spiritual world, but definitely somebody very, very special. And Mahaprabhu said, more Senapati Bhakta, my, my general devotee. General means chief devotee will come and preach. So he was obviously referring to Prabhupada, but we don't know in Mahaprabhu's Leela who is this Senapati Bhakta. But definitely what he has done, and still people are following. 50 years after he passed away, still we are following his books, his teachings. And this is what it says. Srila Prabhupada had made Krishna consciousness possible for people all over the world. And even now he's doing it, and he keeps on doing it till Kali Yuga really takes effect. As part of his instruction and example, Srila Prabhupada knew he would have to show people just how to die. He had escaped death a number of times by Krishna's grace, by the prayers of his disciples, and by his own pure and powerful will to propagate his movement. But from the signs given to him by Lord Krishna in 1977, Srila Prabhupada began decisively and conclusively ending his mission in the material world. And among his final duties was his giving complete guidelines on how to die. He was perfectly showing how to do that, which everyone has to do, but which is most difficult thing to do successfully is to die. Most difficult thing to do. As I mentioned, Gaur Govind Maharaj, he showed by his example. Of course, Bhakti Tirth Maharaj also showed, but Gaur Govind Maharaj, he was in Mayapur, and devotees had come to him asking him question, why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu moved to Jagannath Puri after taking sannyas? What was the internal reason? And Maharaj was explaining that, and he went into ecstasy. He could not speak, and he asked his disciples to start chanting. And they were chanting, just listening to chanting. And before that, he had done his Krishna Katha. He left his body, just like that. Perfect way of leaving the body. But a loving conflict was there. Prabhupada loved his disciples. He also knew they were not yet fully mature. His movement already had great potency and stature in the world, and yet it had many enemies. He was inclined to always protect his devotees, his movement, and all living entities, even the animals. So when his most intimate and faithful disciples pleaded that they could not go on without him, he had turned from showing how to die, agreeing to stay with them and preach. But at what point would they ever be willing to let him go? At what point could he say that the world of Maya and the enemies of Krishna were all gone? At what point would his disciples become fully mature? These are question marks. Nobody knew. In following his decision to stay, Srila Prabhupada turned himself over to his disciples, allowing them to care for him completely. Those who took part recalled that never before had Srila Prabhupada allowed such intimate dealings between himself and his disciples. The only thing comparable was in New York in 1966 when he had been very intimate in dealings with the first persons to join him, persons who had known nothing of the etiquette of approaching a spiritual master. But those who were present now and who had also been present then said that these days were even more intimate. Intimate in the sense they could serve Prabhupada personally, they could be with him, massage him, take care of him, and with the hope that Prabhupada is going to live, Prabhupada is going to remain with them. At one point, Kirtananda firmly insisted that Srila Prabhupada drink a full cup of juice, even when he had said he had had enough. Kirtananda felt awkward, insisting, I'm not like Mother Yashoda that I can do this, he said. I keep remembering that you are my spiritual master. But Srila Prabhupada allowed himself to be ordered by Kirtananda. Similarly, Bhavanand, Tamal Krishna, Bhakticharu, Upendra, and other servants coaxed Srila Prabhupada to follow certain diets and cared for his body constantly. The other devotees were reminded of the story of Ishwar Puri, who gave intimate bodily service to his spiritual master, Madhvendra Puri, when Madhvendra Puri was in the last stages of his life and apparently invalid. So, Ishwar Puri, who later became spiritual master of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he served his spiritual master, Madhvendra Puri, like a menial servant, means cleaning him up, his stool and urine, and bathing him and feeding him. He was doing it personally, while Madhvendra Puri was lying on the bed. He could not even move. And as Bharat said, apparently invalid. That was just his pastime. But Ishwar Puri really served. And according to Chaitanya Charitamrita, it was by this menial bodily service that Ishwar Puri proved his love for his spiritual master and was allowed to become the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya. And on the other hand, there was another disciple of Madhvam Puri, Ramchandra Puri. Ramchandra Puri somehow he developed some Mayavadi inclinations, although disciple of Madhvendra Puri. And when Madhvendra Puri, at the last time, on his last days, he was lamenting that, oh, I did not develop love for Krishna, I could not serve Krishna properly. Of course, this lamentation is part of ecstasy actually. A devotee never thinks that he has done plenty. He always thinks, I haven't done anything. But Ramchandra Puri, because of his inclination, because of some association with wrong people, he had developed these inclinations of Mayavad philosophy. He was rebuking his own spiritual master. Oh, why you're crying like this? Oh Krishna, I didn't do this. You should be thinking of Brahman at this time when you're leaving the body. And Madhavendra Puri got so angry at Ramchandra Puri. He said, you fool, you rascal, you get out of my sight. Otherwise, I don't even want to see you. Just get out. So he committed offense against Madhavendra Puri and later committed offense against Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also. So he was basically doomed. So even though he was disciple of Madhavendra Puri, still, so association is very important and service, like Ishwar Puri served his spiritual master. That is very important. Okay, I guess we can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments. Okay, you all have safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Okay, Prabhupada. Thank you.